He's the Son of God.
Guns and a guru.
So there'll be no excuse.
He wanted to have as many people killed in that compound as possible.
Today, it exploded. Armageddon came to the Branch Davidians.
We were doing what we thought was best to try to prevent this tragedy from occurring.
It was the family's worst fear. And tonight, the questions burn in the ashes outside of Waco. What about the children? Did it have to end this way?
David Koresh said he played the game. He never intended to come out. It was all a game.
This is a CBS News special report. Reckoning in Texas. Good evening, I'm Dan Rather. It was beginning to look as if the standoff between federal agents and that group of religious fanatics in Central Texas might last an eternity. But today, the siege came to a sudden and horrible end. Apparently, a mass suicide. The leader of the cult claimed all along to be taking orders directly from heaven. But it was David Koresh himself who apparently gave the order that turned the cult compound into a scene from hell, with more than 90 people holed up inside, including 25 children and 2 pregnant women. Followers of Koresh set fire to the compound. The flames spread quickly. Tonight, all that's left of the compound on the hill is a smoldering pile of ashes. As many as 86 people, including Koresh, are presumed dead. Only 9 people are known to have survived. The FBI is defending and explaining its decision to pump tear gas into the compound this morning in what turned out to be an unsuccessful attempt to force a peaceful end to the standoff. And Congress, led by Republicans but not confined to Republicans, the Congress is planning investigations into the entire affair and how it was handled by federal agencies. The standoff lasted 51 days. CBS News correspondent John Roberts shows you how the final day began and ended.
Shortly before dawn at the Branch Davidian compound, cult members got a wake-up call.
Branch Davidian member Steve Snyder was telephonically contacted and advised that the FBI would begin shortly to insert tear gas into the compound. Snyder immediately hung up the phone.
As the sun came up, the first M60 combat engineering vehicle punched a hole in the cult's building, pouring tear gas into the complex.
Not an indication that our patience has run out. The action was taken today was, we believe, the next logical step in a series of actions to bring this episode to a conclusion.
Throughout the morning, the tanks went in, taking hostile fire from cult members, saturating the compound with choking gas.
The occupants in the compound were advised, this is not an assault. Do not fire. If you fire, your fire will be returned. We are introducing non-lethal tear gas. Exit the compound now and follow instructions. You are responsible for your own actions.
But cult members remained defiant, taking all federal officials could throw at them. The FBI believes they were protected by gas masks. An hour into the operation, cult members used a familiar tactic, a banner asking that their phone, which Steve Snyder reportedly threw out the window in a rage, be fixed. Shortly after, a cult member was seen trying to re-establish contact with FBI agents. For weeks, through numerous delaying tactics, it was believed Branch Davidian leader David Koresh was seeking a final armed confrontation with federal officials. There were also rumors that the cult, which was preparing for the end of the world, had a suicide pact.
We thought that this was probably the best way to prevent that type of suicide pact from taking place. That is, cause this confusion inside the compound. Also, we thought that their instincts, the motherly instincts would take place and that they would want their children out of that environment.
The FBI's assessment proved wrong shortly after noon. As an armored vehicle administered another dose of tear gas, the Branch Davidian brought the house down around them. Smoke, then flames erupted from the second floor. As the scene played out live on television, David Koresh's grandmother watched, dumbfounded and grief-stricken.
He wouldn't have done that to those children. No, not his family neither.
But it seems either Koresh or one of his followers did give the order. FBI sharpshooters say they witnessed cult members setting fires in at least 2 locations. Whipped by the stiff Texas wind, reportedly fueled by kerosene and explosives stored inside, the fire engulfed the compound within minutes. One of the first areas to be consumed, the upper-level sleeping quarters, where it's believed 25 children were housed. No one expected a biblical-style inferno.
We were going to just gradually increase the pressure day by day until we hoped that through negotiation or through them walking out, they would walk out. Obviously, if I thought the chances were great of a mass suicide, I would never have approved the plan. Everything that we were told, every indication of the reactions to the pressure up to that point was that that would not occur.
The Attorney General took full responsibility.
These are the hardest decisions in the world to make. My heart goes out to the families of the agents killed and those injured, as well as to those children and the families of those who perished in the compound today. We must all reflect on how we as a society can in the future prevent such a senseless, horrible, tragic loss of human life.
It appeared federal officers were caught off guard by this final, desperate act. It took fully 30 minutes for fire trucks to reach the compound. By the time they arrived, there was nothing left to save. Late this afternoon, the FBI announced it appeared just 9 of the 95 people inside survived.
We can only assume that there was a massive loss of life. Unfortunately, we have to assume that the children probably are also dead. There was some statements early on that by people coming out that David had indicated the children had been secured in the bunkers. It appeared that this was one final lie on the part of David's part to assure some people that the children had been taken care of. It appears once again his last final act to the American public was to go through a lie.
The tragic outcome of the Branch Davidian standoff has raised questions. Did the FBI push an already strained situation too far? And were all the possible options considered before moving in?
Well, I think a lot of questions need to be asked about why today, why was it so important to run those tanks in there and the tear gas today, why couldn't it wait to see if this would be a peaceful solution like David assured us that it would be.
I don't think it was mishandled. I think the FBI has acted very professionally, very ably, and with remarkable restraint.
But the mother of a Branch Davidian cult member killed in the initial assault February 28th says both sides share responsibility.
All those people that went in there to study the Bible, they were misguided, yes. They were led astray by David Koresh, and they're victims of David Koresh, but now they're also victims of our government.
As a symbol of defiance lay in a smoking ruin, the fate of cult leader David Koresh remained unclear. But officials believe the speed and intensity of the blaze claimed the lives of almost all of those inside, what had been for weeks referred to as Ranch Apocalypse. John Roberts, CBS News.
One of the people who made it out of the cult compound alive today is a 24-year-old man, David Thibodeau, from Bangor, Maine. His mother, Yolanda Gainham, has been in Central Texas for most of the siege. I asked her tonight if she had spoken to her son since he escaped today's inferno.
He said it was horrible. He said that they were covered in smoke. It was difficult to know what to do, which way to turn, which way to run. He said it happened very, very, very fast, and that his reaction was just to grab anyone who was around him, move as quickly as he could. He wanted to be out. I gather very strongly that he wanted to be out of that situation, that it did happen really fast, and there was very, very little to consider. I am elated that my son is alive, that he is unharmed, that he is able to be in contact with me right now. But this is a very confusing, upsetting, horrifying situation. There's much to learn about it.
What responsibility do you attach to Koresh himself?
Koresh is the person who is ill, who is sick in this case. I think what was more necessary was for families and authorities to be working together to establish a point of contact for the people who had fallen underneath David's mind control. I think we have to understand that David was a master of mind control and of thought reform. David Koresh believed completely in what he was doing, but we really believed that if we had had the opportunity to use our voices to make direct negotiation contact with our families, that we might have had the ability to halt the tragedy that we all saw today.
Few people knew cult leader David Koresh as well as Robin Bunds. She used to be married to him, and they had a son together, now 4 years old. Robin Bunds left Koresh and the compound 2 years ago. She joins us tonight live from Pomona, California. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Bunds. Were you surprised by what happened today and how it happened?
I was very surprised, and I was shocked, and I was very sad, and I did not expect this to happen. I did not expect him to kill everybody.
Do you think Koresh had this kind of suicide pact in mind all along?
No, I don't. I think that he might have planned on coming out, but I think what happened is that he just felt cornered and felt he had no choice and just did what he did because he felt there was no other way out.
It's one woman's opinion, but you've had time to think about it. Anything in your mind that you say to yourself, well, might have prevented this from happening?
I've thought about it and thought about it and thought about it, and I really don't think there was any way to prevent this because he is so stubborn, and there is no way. He's right and you're wrong. It doesn't matter. He doesn't listen to anybody.
How was it that he was able to exert such control over the people with him, Ms. Bunds?
He didn't control us all at once. When we first started, he had very little control over us. It came gradually, and then eventually he had full control over us, our bodies, our minds, everything we did, we thought we wanted to do, we would ask his permission, but it wasn't all at once. It's a brainwashing.
How could he have taken the children down with him to death?
He believes that they're all going to come back. He believes that they're going to be resurrected, and that since he is God, his children are God's children. They're perfect. They're God's seed, and they're going to repopulate the earth with this seed when they come back, and these children will be special children because they're martyrs for God.
Robin Bunds in Pomona, California. Thank you. Stay here with us now for more of the CBS News special report. 7 months ago, a siege that began with what turned out to be an abortive raid on the Koresh compound by federal agents. CBS News correspondent Vicki Mabry, who covered the story from the beginning and right the way through, tells us what happened. Vicki?
Dan, as you said, it has been almost 2 months, and it was 2 months of boredom, anger, frustration, and betrayal for federal agents. The men and women who work for ATF prepare for and carry out hundreds of these raids every year, but this time something went terribly wrong.
ATF agents attempting to serve arrest and search warrants on a cold, rainy Sunday morning in February did not expect to be pinned down and outgunned by cult leader David Koresh and more than 100 of his followers. But when the 45-minute gunfight ended, 4 ATF agents were dead, another 16 wounded. It was the beginning of one of the longest-running sieges in American history.
I, David Koresh, agree upon the broadcasting of this tape to come out peacefully.
Hopes for a peaceful settlement were raised 3 days after the standoff began, when radio stations nationwide played a 58-minute sermon Koresh recorded. But Koresh reneged, saying he was waiting for a message from God. In the first 10 days, Koresh's only concession was the release of 21 children. By day 16, the psychological warfare of bright lights and annoying sounds had begun. The 19th day, almost 3 weeks, brought renewed hope that Koresh would find his message in the night sky in the form of the new moon. But the only movement was the surrender of 9 adult cult members who were promptly jailed. By the end of the first month, federal negotiators were desperate enough to allow outsiders contact with the compound. Koresh and his second-in-command, Steve Schneider, talked face-to-face with lawyers amid indications cult members might give up at the end of a 7-day Passover celebration. But that, too, was not to be. Koresh had begun to write his interpretation of the biblical 7 seals.
Mr. Schneider says he's going to have to edit every one. Mr. Koresh does not have any more than a 9th grade education, so he does not write very well. So everything will have to be rewritten. So I figure 4 or 5 months tops.
1 week after that, federal agents had the authorization they had requested. They had permission to use tear gas to flush David Koresh and his followers out of the compound. Dan?
Vicki Mabry, live just outside of Waco, thanks. The ashes outside the compound aren't cold yet. By no means have all the bodies been recovered, but already doubts are being raised in Congress about what happened today and why. Representative Don Edwards, a Democrat of California, who chairs a House Judiciary Subcommittee, is already promising to look into today's events perhaps as early as Thursday. Republican Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania said earlier in the day that he was interested in an investigation. Earlier this evening, we talked to Attorney General Janet Reno about a possible congressional investigation. The Republican Senator Specter, as you heard, came out rather quickly this afternoon saying that he thought the Senate Judiciary Committee should investigate this. Were you disappointed with the speed with which he did that?
No, as I have said, and I would welcome the opportunity to meet with the Judiciary Committee to be open, candid, review all the details. When you have a decision like this, no decision like this is easy. It's one of the hardest decisions that anybody can make because there are very few people in this world such as David Koresh. You do the best you can, you make the best judgment you can after trying to fully inform yourself, and then you answer questions. And I welcome questions from Senator Specter. I look forward to those. I look forward to meeting with the Judiciary Committee with one ultimate goal. What can we do, if anything, in the future to prevent such a really senseless, horrible tragedy such as this from occurring again?
Ms. Reno, when you were making the decision, when you reviewed the FBI recommendation and were in the process of making the decision, was there anybody high up in the U.S. government, or for that matter, anybody who said, don't do this, don't make this move, particularly don't make it today?
Nobody.
Ms. Reno, what, in your opinion, is the most important thing for rank-and-file Americans to know about the decision-making process and the decisions that you made today?
What we have tried to do over these last weeks is to do everything possible to save human life, understanding that a man who could do this, who could arm himself as he had, who could make the statements he had, could threaten mass suicide at any time. And this seemed to be the time that if we were ever going to be in the best position to control, it would be now.
When you made the decision to go in, Ms. Reno, were you given odds about the possibility of mass suicide?
Never put it in terms of odds, but considered it as a possibility that was remote, considering everything that had happened. But what struck me as the most important factor in my decision at the time was the recognition that if we didn't go in, if this continued, if the circumstances with the children, if the children continued to remain in there, he could stay there indefinitely.
Ms. Reno, you've been very patient with you, and I have only one other question. Those who know you describe you as a perfectionist, that you want to get it right. You believe in excellence, you want to get it right. Hindsight's one of the most difficult things for any of us who think that way. In hindsight, in retrospect, given the recommendations you had, given the information you had, is there anything you would do differently?
Given what I had to deal with, at this point, although I always keep an open mind, there is nothing that I would do differently. Given what I know now, of course there is.
Janet Reno, Attorney General of the United States, thank you very much. When we come back, we'll take a look at cults in town, and as correspondent Bill Lagatudo reports, it could happen yet again.
On the TV set in her living room, Ruth Mosier watched the siege in Waco come to its terrible end. Her daughter Sherry, who lived at the compound, may have willingly followed David Koresh into death. And Ruth Mosier said she knew all along something like this would happen.
I just had a premonition yesterday.
What was that, Kelly? About what?
I'd never see her again.
High winds whipped the
Ruth
fire.
Mosier, like many of us, remembered this was not the first time a cult standoff ended in fire or violence. Philadelphia, 1985. 11 members of the radical environmental group called MOVE, unwilling to give themselves up, died when a police bomb set their headquarters and the neighborhood on fire. And Jonestown, 1981. 900 followers of Jim Jones committed suicide rather than rejoin the outside world. How could federal authorities not think today's long ordeal would end in a similar fashion?
How many times do we have to relearn, or to learn once, the lessons of history?
Psychologist Paul Martin counsels former cult members at this retreat in Ohio.
We sit here and we ask, when is anybody going to wake up?
Watching them die was like watching my family die again.
Winona Norwood lost her mother and 26 other family members at Jonestown.
Here we go again. Pathetic. These ego, power-hungry maniacs. Why can't they be stopped?
Despite the lessons of Jonestown and now Waco, the cult business in America is thriving. By some estimates, there are 2,500 cults operating today, and as many as a third may be preparing for the end of the world. In the mountains of Montana, the Church Universal and Triumphant lives behind barricades. Neighbors think of it as the next Waco. Stephen O'Leary is an expert on so-called Armageddon cults.
These groups have one common thread, which is that at all costs they don't want to be proven wrong. They will go to great lengths, even to taking their own life, to validate their belief.
Most experts agree almost anyone at a lonely or confused moment in life could be susceptible to a cult.
They join because they see the vision, the idealism. When they join, they don't see the abuse.
Only David was leader, and God is in control now. God is the leader now.
Karen Doyle is a Branch Davidian living in California. Her thoughts today on David Koresh.
I don't believe he's dead. Not in that sense. I mean, in the spiritual sense.
Her father was in the compound in Waco today and survived. She's not sure if her sister died with the others. Bill Agatulo, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Psychologist Margaret Singer is a scholar, a student of cults. She studied them for a long time and the people who belong to the cults. Over the past quarter century, Dr. Singer has interviewed many thousands of cult members, and she joins us tonight live from Berkeley, California. Doctor, thank you for being with us. The woman a few moments ago described cult leaders as ego, power-mad maniacs. Does that about say it?
That just about summarizes it, because most cult leaders have to be tremendously self-centered, willing to live off the lives and labors of other people, and totally dedicated that their views are right, and pretty soon they're able to get people to obey them a step at a time till their wishes can carry people to the ending at Jonestown or to the ending today in Waco.
What motivates people to blindly follow such leaders literally to their death?
It has to be done a step at a time. It's that the cult leader sets out to get a following, and he has to at the start, or she has to at the beginning, literally seduce people verbally, woo them to join the group, and then a step at a time in small incremental steps get control over all of their decision making, so that, like with David Koresh, he eventually not only had control of where they lived, he even got to the stage of controlling their bodies and with whom people could have sex. And it's a step at a time leading people to give over their power, their decision making to the cult leader.
Are these cults increasing or decreasing in the United States?
I find from my work that they're increasing. Most people thought that when Jonestown happened, that was the turning point, that no one would ever join one of these, quote, strange groups. But small groups have sprung up, and all across the nation, rather venal people have come to see how easily all of us can be persuaded. And with a certain determination, some of these self-appointed gurus, self-appointed messiahs, have done the usual centuries-old method of seducing someone a step at a time to believe that they have a special mission, a special power, special knowledge, and that if people will just follow, they'll show them the way to nirvana, to total mental health, to happiness. Whatever the cult leader is selling, they sell it to some followers.
Dr. Margaret Singer, thank you very much for being with us from Berkeley, California. Joining us now from Waco, Texas, is a man who knew David Koresh for years, Ed Ray Goins. They were longtime friends, and while Goins was not a member of the cult, he did visit Koresh at the compound many times. Thanks for being with us. Your friend, it's fair to call him your friend, is it not? David Koresh kept promising there would be no suicide. What, in your judgment, happened?
Well, I had asked him, about the suicide because I'd heard they were supposed to do it a couple of years ago, and he told me that they'd never think of a suicide. And I think, personally, what happened today, they don't consider what they've done a suicide. They consider it a fulfilling of a prophecy.
You were his friend. You knew him well, but you never joined the cult. Why?
I really wasn't interested. I was out there for the musical part of it. I was buying some equipment off of him, and the religion part just didn't interest me.
Did you consider him to be crazy?
No. He was a very smart person. He knew what he was talking about. He had something he wanted to teach people, and it made a lot of sense the way he taught it. But it was just something I was not interested in.
When you saw the whole compound destroyed in smoke and fire today, what did you think?
I was sad. I was worried about my friends inside, the kids. I was expecting any time that I'd see all these people running out, but it didn't happen like that. Just a handful came out.
In your judgment, why did more not try to escape?
Because they believe firmly in what David's teaching. They believe that when they die, they will be part of the wave sheet. They will have a higher status than all the other people, and they're supposed to come back and lead the rest of the people to Mount Zion.
Ed Ray Goins in Waco, thanks. So the siege in Central Texas has finally ended, tragically. The story, though, is not over. Far from it. Investigators will be going through the debris of the self-described Branch Davidian compound, looking for the remains of David Koresh and the scores of people he apparently led to their deaths. And members of Congress will be looking for answers about the way federal officials handled the siege. CBS News covered this story early, covered it straight the way through, and stayed late. We'll be staying on it now, too. There'll be more about it overnight on the CBS News program Up to the Minute, first thing in the morning on CBS This Morning, and we'll have all of tomorrow's developments on tomorrow evening's CBS Evening News. For now, Dan Rather in New York. Thanks for joining us.